Alright, welcome back to the forecast card. Pretty solid day to start the NIT. Jacksonville State versus GT under 142.5. I still fully believe this is the right side. The total ends at 145, and that's despite the fact that Jacksonville State shot fucking 15 for 30 from 3. And albeit, this is a team that shoots, is ranked 257th from 3-point percentage. St. Louis, basically a top 100 3-point defense. I understand that, and Jacksonville State was on the road, and they shot that well. I don't know what to say. I really didn't expect them to shoot that well from 3. That kind of killed it. And the thing that pissed me off the most is that Pierre Jr., their primary scorer, he played 39 minutes, man. They were dominating this entire game, especially in the second half, but they refused to bench any starters, which was pretty annoying to see. This guy made a 3 when they were up 24 points with 4 minutes left. So pretty pathetic that they kept him in, but it is what it is. They make one fewer 3 with cash, so I'm not too upset about it. St. Louis plus 5.5. St. Louis played fine offensively. Arkansas State just played lights out. I guess they maybe at home they had a bit more motivation to play, but they shot 16 for 35 from 3. This was much closer. This was 60% at half. It kind of only dropped because they ended up benching a lot of their players with 10 minutes left, and their bench players kept missing 3s. But most of their starters were well above 50% from 3. Just completely lights out. Scoring 103 points. It's kind of hard to cover as a dog when this game goes 30 points over the total, which was basically all because of Arkansas State's shooting. But St. Louis still shoots 48% from 3. But they still got out rebounded, had more turnovers. So overall, it was St. Louis's game to lose. So I guess I was on the wrong side on that one. Oklahoma State first half shouldn't have been sweaty, but it was. I think they were up 14 or 13 points with 5 minutes left. Kind of allowed them back into the game, but they fortunately don't get backdoored as the other team had a 2-pointer at the buzzer, which would have pushed the side. So luckily, it ends up cashing -3. Stanford, full game, 1 half, both pretty sweat-free. They were dominating the entire game. And of course, a lot comes through. Santa Clara wins this game by 39. Not much of a sweaty game against UC Riverside, who I do think is super overrated. And Santa Clara, they just needed someone to let out their anger of that pathetic Pepperdine performance. So yeah, pretty easy one there. But yeah, that brings us to 3-2 in the NIT so far. 1-0 in the locks. For this video, I'm only going to be covering the NIT games, so there's however many 9 or 10 games. I have 5 bets in these tournament games, and then the other 2 bets you can check out on my previous video a couple videos back, which I covered all 4 of the first 4 games. We went 2-0 in terms of who would advance, but both the favorites advanced, so not that impressive. But we were able to cover the one spread, and then of course I was on the wrong side in that North Carolina game. That was a completely one-sided shit-on, belt-to-ass victory for North Carolina. Definitely a statement win from them. Yeah, I definitely have them going far in my bracket. I do think their momentum is insane, and if they could ride that momentum into the rest of the tournament, I think they might be a threat, especially to making it to maybe the Final Four. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they keep up this against much higher competition. Anyway, let's get into the 5 games that I like for tomorrow. All right, heading out to game number 1, we have UAB versus Saint Joe's. Now, I love this Saint Joseph's team. Obviously, the Atlantic 10's a tough division, and obviously they didn't make the tournament, but I really think they're a much better team here than UAB. UAB playing the American, and in my opinion, a much weaker division. St. Joseph naturally has played a harder schedule. I think they're the well more balanced team. That's definitely a way better defensive team. Now, if you look at where this St. Joe's team likes to score, they shoot basically 3s in paint. They don't really like to shoot a lot of mid-range. And they're obviously not that elite offensively. They're top 100 in the paint, top 150 in the 3-point. But UAB is an awful defensive team. They don't foul a lot. They don't turn the ball over. But the only thing they defend well is the mid-range. They're basically ranked 300th in 3-point defense, 300th in near-basket defense. St. Joe's is going to find a lot of success with their elite three starters that I think are some of the best players in the Atlantic 10. I think they're going to find a lot of success, especially if they're hooking up 3s at home where they're comfortable in their home court. UAB, questioning their motivation in this game. They just played off a really grueling loss where they kind of threw away any chance they had of making the tournament, losing to Memphis, who already basically had an automatic bid. So they're probably going to be really tilted from that game. Now they're having to travel for a tournament where they were, one game away from making it all the way to the big dance. So I think they're going to be frustrated here. They're traveling over 800 miles to play this game. St. Joseph's has the bodies in the paint to deal with their big boys with Rushier Fleming. I think this is a good matchup for St. Joe's. And they're the better team coming from a better conference. And UAB, they're a team that shoots quite a lot of mid-range, around 31% from the mid-range, which is a lot more than most teams. And that's something that St. Joe's defends really well, top 75 in mid-range defense. UAB probably will find some success in the paint. They'll probably find a little bit of success on the offensive boards, some success in forcing turnovers, but in terms of quality shooting, they're going to struggle. And if they can't get free points off of steals and off offensive boards, they're not going to get to the free throw line much. I love this spot for St. Joe's. I think we're getting them a really fair line. -4.5 on FanDuel. St. Joe's at home plays really good. UAB on the road has played worse. And I think we're getting them in a bit more of I would say more of a motivational spot. But I do think we're getting them in a pretty solid spot here. So give me St. Joe's -4.5 in the first game at 7 p.m. All right, heading on to game number 2, we have Samford versus George Mason. Now, George Mason is a team due for a metric ton of regression. So is Samford, but again, I think George Mason is coming from a much harder conference in the Atlantic 10 versus Samford coming from the Southern. Really the only thing Samford does well, and they do really well, they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in college basketball at forcing turnovers. But if they're not forcing turnovers, they are not very good at scoring. They're a decent three-point shooting team, but this is a really elite George Mason defense that I think is going to smother them at home. They play a much slower pace than Samford, and I think they're going to make them uncomfortable because I do believe they are the better team in this match. George Mason, they're a pretty good first-half team. Samford typically comes out much slower, so I'm just going to take them on the first half because George Mason definitely has a tendency to let teams back into games, and I don't really want to have to deal with that. But again, George Mason offensively is going to have no problems. Samford, not a good defense at all. Because of their turnovers, they do technically limit the amount of field goal attempts that you do get, but when you do get a shot off, you're going to have a pretty solid chance. Their Samford is basically ranked 250 to 300 in every defensive category. They foul a ton. James Johnson, not a great free throw shooting team, but at home, it does bump up to around 73%, so I think they're going to find some success. They're going to have a lot of success on the offensive boards. They're also going to be able to force their fair amount of turnovers. Samford is really good at forcing turnovers, but they're also actually worse than George Mason in giving the ball up. So it's hard for me to see where Samford's going to get points, especially if George Mason takes care of the ball. Again, Samford, they like to shoot threes. George Mason, top 63-point team defense. They're elite, near basket defense, top 20 mid-range defense. They don't foul, don't give you offensive boards, but they do turn over the ball quite a lot. And that's kind of where Samford's going to have to find out ways to score. And again, I don't think that relying on turnovers makes you, helps you with consistent scoring. And George Mason, one of the most consistent teams in college basketball, ranked 22nd in consistency. Samford outside of the top 200. So I do like the spot here for George Mason. Again, both teams do for a ton of regression. If you kind of dig into it, it's obviously going to be kind of questionable. You don't really know how good either of these teams are. But George Mason, they play really good at home. They're 17-1 at home this year. And this is the first time these two teams are playing. I think George Mason has played, again, way harder competition. And they're the way better team. And because of how slow they play, it's going to be tough for the Samford team who loves to play in transition to really play in transition. So if they can't force turnovers, they're probably going to end up fouling a lot. If you look at the power ratings between these two teams, George Mason plays a little bit better at home than they do on the road. Top 80 team in college basketball. Samford plays about the same as well on the road, but their schedule they played is so much easier. I think their last 5 rating, they've fallen outside the top 200. They've really let themselves go to end off the year. They're going to be coming into this game super unmotivated. George Mason played some of their best basketball to end off the year. I think we're getting them in an elite spot. In terms of first reason, I'm taking first half. Samford is a much worse first half team than they are second half. George Mason plays basically the same in both halves, but they're much better of a first half team, especially offensively. They typically do allow teams to come back in defensively. But I think we're getting a solid price here. full game or half, whichever you prefer. I know some books don't really offer first half lines, but we're getting a George Mason team again, 17-1 at home, outright as home favorites. They haven't really covered that much at home. They're 8-10 as home favorites, but we're getting a Samford team that's 1-3 against the spread on the road. They're traveling, 600 miles to play this game. They're 1-3 in their last games, traveling that far. George Mason is 4-0 in their last 4 games at home, basically covering this number every single time. Even in the game where they only beat Saint Josephs by 1, they would have covered the spread in the first half. So give me George Mason, first half, -3.5. That's going to be our lock for today. Moving on to game number 3, we have Dayton versus FAU. Now this line stinks because I do think Dayton is significantly the better team. In almost every capacity, I do think they're the better team. They haven't necessarily been that good on the road, but they're still better on the road than FAU is at home. Dayton is a team that shoots a lot of paint shots, mid-range not really so much. FAU is an elite paint defense, so I'll give them that. But Dayton has the ability to really get hot from 3, and this is an FAU team that really struggles at defending the 3. FAU fouls quite a lot. Dayton is a team that can get to the line quite often, ranked 40th in free throw attempts per game. They're a solid free throw shooting team, top 75. They're going to force a lot of turnovers. They're going to have a lot of success on the offensive boards against this FAU team. Really, all FAU can do is they got some bigs that sit in the paint and kind of stuff you up. But if you can shoot threes, they're not very athletic. You'll be able to get your offensive rebounds. They're pretty slow. You can force a ton of turnovers from them, and they typically do foul quite often just because of the way that they play. They played the better team all year. They've been basically a top 75 team compared to FAU that's been a borderline outside of top 100 team. FAU, they shoot a lot in the paint. They're also going to have some success in the paint. Dayton does struggle defending the paint, but everywhere else, offensive boards, turnovers, free throws, everything else kind of leans towards Dayton here. So if FAU can't find success in the paint, they're not going to find success at all. This is a Florida Atlantic team that's been pretty dog shit, honestly, all year. I guess you could argue that this line stinks enough where maybe FAU is the right side. But I have this model as a 6-point win for Dayton. I'm just going to trust here that I'm not missing anything. Of course, Dayton is traveling almost 1,000 miles to play this game, but they're 3-1 in their last significant travel spots compared to FAU that's still 2-2 at home. Really struggling against any step up in competition. If you look at what FAU, they beat East Carolina and Charlotte at home, but they played North Texas, lost by 10, and Wichita State lost by 7 at home. So I think Dayton is kind of in that same stratosphere of teams. In terms of power ratings, Dayton on the road, top 80 team. Florida Atlantic at home, top 120. Dayton has played the harder schedule. They've been the better team to end off the year. Basically a top 75 team. FAU, borderline not even a top 100 team. And FAU typically kind of stat pads their stats a lot from beating up on bad teams, but they have typically struggled a lot more against these middle of the pack teams like Dayton. So give me Dayton here. I don't love this spot just because the line feels a little bit trappy. Perhaps there's some kind of transfer portal on Dayton or something I don't know about, but I think Dayton's going to show up for this game, especially since they've only been playing better to end off the year. I think they're going to want to finish off on a good note. All right, bringing us to game number 4, we have North Alabama versus Bradley. Now, this is kind of a weird game because originally Bradley had 2 players that were kind of sitting out for this game, one going to the portal, one I'm not sure about. But it seems like Darius Hannah is going to play, and he's like their big forward. I think he was probably the most important player. Montgomery's still a top 3 scorer, but I think Bradley's still the better team without him. Now, it's a Bradley team that I think is way better than this North Alabama team. I have them winning this game by 4.5. They played a significantly harder schedule than North Alabama. Top 100 schedule. North Alabama's played the 300th hardest schedule, one of the easiest schedules, especially in the Atlantic Sun. Obviously, Bradley plays in Missouri Valley. Both these divisions aren't necessarily good. But Bradley, they're a solid offensive team. They're going to find a lot of success here from the 3, from the mid-range, from the paint against this North Alabama team that can't defend very well. They don't turn the ball over, which is always good, but again, when you look at schedule strength, you kind of always have to look at these stats with a grain of salt. Bradley has had to play much tougher competition, and they have a better outright record. So I think that is kind of speaking to the quality of these 2 teams. North Alabama, they like to shoot most of their shots in the paint. Almost 40% of their shots come from in the paint. Bradley, elite paint defense. They shoot 35% from the three. Bradley, a really solid top 75 3-point defense, same with near basket. North Alabama will probably get to the line quite a lot. They'll probably find some success on the offensive glass. But again, in terms of just pure shooting, I think Bradley is just a way better team. In terms of regression, Bradley is one of those teams that's due for a metric ton of regression, which is kind of my only concern with them. When I do think about like their record, shouldn't actually be as good as it is. They have had some lucky games and where their shots have been falling, but Bradley's a solid home team. North Alabama plays much worse on the road. They fall roughly 65 rating points on the road. Bradley basically plays the same at home versus on the road. But like with the last five, North Alabama did finish the season off on a really high note, the best in their conference, but this is still a Bradley team that I believe is just miles above North Alabama, and we're getting them at home. North Alabama is going to have to travel 400 miles for this game, where they're 2-2. Bradley is 3-1 in their last 4 games at home. The only loss being a really tight one, but I think there's levels to this. When I do look at quality with Hannah coming back in this game, I do think Bradley is the right side. So again, don't love the spot just because the player's coming back doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be playing his heart out. But I do think they're going to find a lot of success offensively. I might even just take Bradley team total over. But I think the side is just simpler for tracking purposes. But if you're looking for a side, I do think Bradley team total over is also a good look. All right, and in order to avoid the 5-for-5 chalk, there is one dog that I actually quite like. There are quite a few other dogs, but like, man, in these NIT tournaments, it feels like the dogs are either like completely crushing or the favorites are just running away with the game. So I'm basically just looking at these games strictly on who I think is going to win. And I actually think Utah Valley has a chance here to show up. So San Francisco, one of their lead scorers, Marcus Williams, he's going to be out. So again, he's a pretty beefy guard. That's probably one of the more important players on San Francisco. And Utah Valley here, they're a team that obviously they're not that great on the road, and they played much easier of a competition. But again, I don't really know if San Francisco's going to be up for this game. They're due for a metric ton of regression to end off the year. I have this model as a 6-point win for San Francisco. They're a team that likes to shoot a lot of threes, not very good at it. Offensively, they're not that talented. I think, especially in the paint, UVU matches up well. They're good on the boards. They're solid at not turning the ball over. They don't foul very much. I don't know, San Francisco, they're not really threatening offensively. Utah Valley on the other side, they're actually a team that doesn't shoot a lot of threes compared to most other teams in college basketball. And that's basically the only thing that San Francisco defends well. They're a top 4 3-point defense, but the paint, they're not even top 100. Mid-range, basically top 200. They foul a ton. Obviously, Utah Valley is not an elite free throw shooting team, but in a game like this, I think they're going to get to the line a lot. They're going to find a bit more success on the offensive boards in San Francisco. Again, when you look at schedule strength, you kind of have to take these stats with a grain of salt, but San Francisco, a team still due for a ton of regression. Utah Valley also due for a decent chunk of regression as well. But I think I really like the points here. I just haven't seen the San Francisco team show up. It seems like this is a Utah Valley team that kind of likes to play, I guess, up to their competition. If you look at the power ratings between these two teams, Utah Valley ended off pretty solid. Last 10, top 80. Last 5, top 90. San Francisco, last 5, top 90. Like, on paper, these two teams have kind of finished off on a good side. Obviously, Utah Valley is one of the best home teams in college basketball. They play much worse on the road, and San Francisco plays a little bit better at home. But I think this line is trying to tell us something. I would expect San Francisco to be much bigger favorites, but Utah Valley, 2-2 in their last 4 games, traveling pretty far. San Francisco, 2-2. But the fact that they're down a key rotational player, I think Utah Valley is going to show up here. Knowing that they're huge underdogs, I think they have the talent here to actually keep this game really close, if not win this game outright. So that's going to be my 5th favorite game of the day. All right, in terms of the other 4 games that are happening in the NIT, in terms of leans, I honestly don't love any of these other games. The spreads are a little bit too fat, and they're kind of, I feel like, leaning. Or Texas, they're a team that kind of stops you from 3, but this Furman team just seems to has been shooting really well from 3 for no reason. So I on paper, I would lean North Texas, but I take Furman 8.5 because I think they're a team that seems to shoot threes, even against the best three-point defenses. SMU, Northern Iowa. I would probably lean Northern Iowa here with the points. SMU, I think they're going to be a little rattled. I think they were one of the first teams out of the big tournament. I think they were good enough to probably have made it if they had made it a bit further in the tournament. So they're going to be a bit frustrated. This is one of those games where either SMU is going to win by 40 or Northern Iowa is going to win outright. So not sure I want to touch that kind of game. Similar to our Arkansas State game. Northern Colorado. Yeah, UT Irvine's obviously the much more talented team, especially defensively. But this is a Northern Colorado team that has some talent. So, again, I'm questioning motivation for both teams. Not really sure what would end up happening in this game. UC Irvine has a tendency to either beat teams by 30 or just lose by 30. So, not touching that. And Loyola Chicago, they're the way better team. This line stinks. I think this line should be like -7, and that's why I'm not touching it, because I think it's just a little bit too far off. But yeah, those are the 5 games that I bet for the NIT tournament. I have 2 bets in the qualifying games to get into the top 64. The first 2 today, we did okay, but I actually have bets in the other 2, and I actually feel pretty good about them. One of them being a lock as well, so I guess we'll have 2 locks tomorrow. One in the tournament, one in the March Madness bracket. So that's everything for today. Thanks so much for watching. Nice to be back in the green after a couple tough days to end off the season. But hopefully we can stay in the green moving forward. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Oh, also, in terms of bracket, I'm going to have a video up tomorrow with my full bracket. I'm not too concerned about the other 2 games. I think the 2 teams that are going to play either American or St. Mary's are going to crush them either way. And I do think, this is kind of where I'm iffy, is I think if Xavier makes it, they have a chance to make it far. But I think Texas, if they win that game, I think that they're going to be jumped first round. So I don't particularly love the full progression of that side. But keep that in mind when you do see my bracket. But I am going to go over why I like each game. I have quite a few upsets, more than I typically do, because I think there are quite a lot of overvalued big seeds and a lot of undervalued higher seeds this year coming around, especially since a lot of teams kind of locked in and made it into the tournament despite having a pretty a good record. So yeah, that's everything for today, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Cheers.